Hi, I'm Carolyn Letvin. I'm a member of NEBA, and I host the show and tells at this point in time. And we have three fabulous members who have volunteered to present their work, talk about their work, talk about what goes on between their ears. And we've got Elisa Lanzi, Carol McNamee, and Allie Manning. So I'm going to start right off. Unless there's something else at the end, maybe I'll give you a pitch for all of you people who haven't done it yet to contact me and sign up for future dates that I will be sending out. So anyway, first of all, we'd like to start with Elisa Lanzi. She's a visual artist working at the intersection of printmaking, collage, hand paper making, and poetry. She lives in Western Mass, is a 15+ year member of ZMA's printmaking studio in Florence, and is skilled in multiple green printmaking practices. Raised in an artistic family, Elisa has created art through study and practice since her early years. Her art history and literature studies were accompanied by studio work and advanced by apprenticeships and workshops. She's actively engaged in the arts community through curation, giving talks and teaching workshops. She's also created an online tutorial series in do-it-yourself making paper at home. Show us your stuff, Elisa.
Okay, I am going to share my screen. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The hardest thing about these presentations is always, are you going to be able to see my screen? So we got over that. Nice introduction. I appreciate it. And I start this off with, this is the first book I ever made. And what it is some outtakes from my monotype work, cut up scraps, pasted onto an old desk calendar cover. So because I was really afraid of making my own structures back then, I said, oh, I've got something in my, my kit I can play with. And I was really inspired by the three-dimensionality of a book and what I could possibly do. And really what happened, taking me from printmaking and paper making, I was really searching for this more intimate and multi-dimensional space where I could tell my stories. And I found it with artist books. And at first, my books were emerging as kind of visual, textual companions to my two-dimensional work, but now they've taken on a life of their own. And also, my life as a printmaker, a paper maker, I had a long career as a librarian. I worked in museums and libraries and publishing, woman artist, family member, traveler. All of this contributes to my bookmaking. So I thought I'd start out with the where, since I live all the way over here in Western Mass. So I work in a lot of different places. Here I am at home on Two Ponds Road. And this is my printmaking studio, and it's at the back of our garage. It's a separate space. It's got heat and air conditioning. You see my cute little press in the background. So here's where all the printmaking takes place when I'm not at ZMA's printmaking studio. I also use this as a kind of paper making studio, and I can expand out into my garage. I'm not going to show you a picture of that, but that's where all the kind of wet paper making takes place. I have another place in the house in my basement where all the storage of my equipment and materials. One thing about working across mediums is you just have a lot of stuff. So all of that takes place, not where I work, but in another place. Where does the bookmaking happen? Here's where the bookmaking happens, my dining room table. I love the dining room. There's something about the light in the dining room, this particular room, the fact that it's a nice antique, old, big table. And when it's empty, it's so tempting to work and lay out books. What you'll see here, this is usually how I work. I've got a couple projects going on. So I have some models here, some scraps of different prints, handmade paper, boxes. I have one board in the back. There's all the black and white scraps. I've separated most of my materials by color and by weight, just to help myself. Otherwise, it gets really confusing. In the front, you'll see my paper samples, all the different samples with those little clips to keep. I like to know what kind of paper I'm using and convey that to people who are looking at my work as well. And the other great thing about the dining room table, it's a great place to share with others, and I'll show you in a minute. So I'm also part of communities, lots of communities. On the upper left, you'll see I'm part of a little informal group called Over the River. There's 4 of us, and it's because we live over the river from ZMA's printmaking, that simple. And here we are working on a collaborative book. It's great. We share ideas, we fantasize, we critique. It's a really great, intimate group of 4 people. Next is the ZMA's printmaking studio, which is fabulous, just not even the best in Western Mass, the best, I'd say, in New England or beyond. It's really an incredible place. In the lower left, I'm graduating from the Green Printmaking Certificate program at ZMA's. We had a little graduation party. And on the right, I do teach also. I do workshops. This is at Smith College. I did a workshop for the papermaking class, and we're making little books of samples of their paper. And the students just love making books. It was only a couple hours, but it was so much fun working with the students and watching them explore bookmaking. So one of my early books, it was so ambitious. I can't believe I did this. I was still working full-time as a librarian, and I decided I wanted to make a portfolio. Well, I had never done letterpress. I had never made a box. I had never done a lot of things. And it was a very ambitious project. And one thing I learned is it's okay to ask for help. So I did have people help me make the box and help with the letterpress. But it is a portfolio of my own handmade paper and print collages. And this was the first time I put my own poetry out into the world. So there's haiku poems. So this was very exciting for me, even though a lot of work. I realized where I wanted to go and how much I had to learn. So working at ZMA's, I'm on the exhibition committee, and we have a biennial exhibition at the gallery in the APE gallery in Northampton. So one of our themes, actually for 2 years running, was called Extraction. And it was really about, what are we doing to this earth? Why are we doing it? What are the opportunities and pitfalls of technology to help us with all these global problems? And so my first response was this little book I called Sunscreen. And it was really imagining, because I'm such a sun lover, what would happen if we didn't have the sun, or if the sun was muted by all this new technology of trying to block the sun so it's not so hot here. So I made a very simple accordion book with some pasting in there using different materials, my own collage material, my own homemade paper, other people's handmade paper. And I realized one thing when I made this book, I really love this rectangular format. So that got me going on that favorite format that I still work in. Another year, the year after we had that exhibition, the challenge was, okay, there's all these horrible things happening in the world, climate change, the world is divided. And the challenge was to think about something positive, and what are the positive things that could come out of this? And I was very inspired by something that John Coltrane had said, and I'm going to quote here so I don't get it wrong. He said, "One positive thought produces millions of positive vibrations." And I had these prints. They were about vibrations, but I didn't realize they were about what John Coltrane was actually talking about. So I took this series, that they're dry point plates, and there's a little bit of collage in here, and made a book. And also incorporated some of my handmade paper. You'll see the box. And then made a little banner for the front. I didn't want the words to be in the book itself. I wanted that little banner. And this was the beginning also of me using this hinged format in the Leporello style. And I've used these hinges quite a bit. They're a really easy thing to do. And the hinges become part of the book, not just the binding. So I'll show you next where I've taken this. So the dining room table often becomes a mood board. And this is a mood board that I had done for 2 of my books. And you'll see there's pieces of textile, formats, little pieces of poetry, collage, all kinds of stuff. And this mood board actually, the 2 books came out of this. And the 2 books that came out of this mood board were Sunken Garden and Now November. And these books are using that hinged format, and you can see the hinges. I like the way you can see the hinges, and I specifically use washi paper, which is Eastern style paper that this is not my own paper, these hinges, they're from Paper Connection, which is a wonderful paper source in Rhode Island.
So this is a paper hinge?
This is a paper hinge. Yeah. These are paper hinges. And I've also made paper hinges. I've done circles. I've gone crazy with these paper hinges. I just love what they do. And the surface is just museum board. So I like that instead of just paper that might, fall over. I like having these museum boards as well. So what am I doing now? I've got so much going on. I mentioned in introduction, my son is getting married in June, so a little bit of distraction there, but I'm still working. And this is a long-term project for me. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. So on the bottom, you see, I wrote a poem about paper making, and I did it up on the Vandercook press, and I've got all these sheets of this poem, beautiful letterpress printing. Along with that, I have my recipe books from paper making. And then my little group, Over the River group, we gave each other a challenge. We said, let's bring all our found containers to the table. And the challenge is the next project you work on, you need to work with your found containers. So there's some of my found containers. We all have a million boxes. I happen to keep a lot of boxes. And I'm thinking about working with this theme of paper making, process, little catalogs of things. I have a million ideas, and the nice thing, something Julie Chen said, I saw her lecture a few weeks ago at Smith College. She said, what did she say? The book in your head is not a book. And then I added, until it gets to the table. So I had this book in my head, and I said, I better start putting stuff on the table. So this is a big project, not for the next few months, but it's been percolating for so long. And behind that project is also my interest in textiles, women working with textiles, women working with paper, little sample books I've done in the past. Really a long time ago, I did these sample books of paper. So kind of bringing all of this together into a book project. So another project, this is more immediate, because this project has to do with an exhibition I'm doing in July, a 2-person show called Excavations Revelations, Exploring the Intimacy of Place. And 2-person show, it's in Northampton at Anchor House. So I'm showing my prints, but in addition, I want to make little books as takeaways for people. I'll probably sell them for a very reasonable price. So here's some formats that I love, simple formats I want to play around with. The one in the bottom, I love having the envelope. I love making the envelopes and the enclosures. And also I collect little sample books of artists, like historical books of art papers. So just thinking about that and making those sample books. Not sure about the exact format, but I'll actually be deciding tomorrow since I have to make these little books. Let's see what's next. Oh, and finally, another project. And this is, again, this has been in the hopper for a few years. I had an exhibition at the library, Jones Library in Amherst, Massachusetts, a few years ago. And the exhibition was called Capriccio. It was prints, collage, my handmade paper, all two-dimensional work, all framed on that theme. And a friend of mine who's a poet who teaches at UMass Amherst, she teaches poetry and language studies as well. Her name is Magda Russotto, and we're kind of Mediterranean buddies as well. She has a similar aesthetic to me. So she came back a couple days ago after seeing the show. She said, "I've written poems about your artwork." I go, "Oh my gosh." So this was a few years ago, and this is called ekphrastic poetry, where a poet responds to works of art. So we are reviving the idea that we never acted on. A couple months ago, we got together and she said, "Okay, I'm going to bring this book to a publisher." So it includes 17 images of mine. Of course, it'll be reproduced, so they're digital images. And the poetry will be Magda's poetry. It'll be in Spanish and English, something that really expands on her interest in kind of Mediterranean languages and my own background as well. So I'm really excited. This is something I've never done before. She has a couple publishers who are interested. So something new in book arts. So I'm going to conclude with that.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I have a million other things to say, but I won't. And
What was the name of the type of poetry of the poet responding to the art? What was that called?
ekphrastic. EKPHRASTIC. It's taken from the Greek. And an ekphrastic poem is a kind of vivid description of a work of art. And her poetry is so wonderful, so nuanced. So, I mean, she's just a wonderful poet. So I was really tickled that she came back from this show and she said, "Look, I've written all these poems." So it was really cool.
Oh, that's amazing. Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh,
I have a friend like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go.
I forgot one last thing. I am going to teach a workshop in Pawtucket. Paper Connection, Lauren Sujita Perlman, created an art annex in Pawtucket. And so I'll be doing, and they're doing workshops there on paper making, print making, book making. So I'm going to do like a half-day workshop on making some simple hinged books. And I'm really interested in giving people a chance to use what they have. So we all hoard all kinds of, I have so much paper, it's not even funny. Prints, outtakes of prints, cut up prints. And I know a lot of people have these materials. So we're going to make little books and it'll be lots of fun. Plus, I do love to teach as well. So you'll be hearing more about that. That'll be in September and I'll post that. So, and
that's terrific.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing. Do we have any questions? Any comments?
I wanted you to go back to the sunscreen image. Are those pullouts?
No.
Tabs.
No. So
with the face on in the screen on the upper left.
Over here in the upper left?
Well, in that section with these two images that are similar with the double page spreads, it looks like on the right-hand side, it's sort of like almost like a face with the tab. What exactly is that? That it looks like it's a pullout of some sort.
It actually, if you look in the lower right, it's the back of the little tab. See this?
I do now. Okay,
it folds over.
So it has a little wrapper.
Yeah, a
Love
belly
wrap.
band, sort
Yeah.
of. Yeah, a
And
little bit of a belly
that,
band. Yeah.
the
Great.
wrap.
Like a cracker box.
Yes, yes, wrappers are so much fun. And then this is also, this is very thin washi paper that I've tipped in, and that's where the text is. And then when you pull it back, you see the image. But of course, I also love working with transparency and layers. Just love that concept.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
so yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. We have one thing in the chat. Let's open that up. Oh, well, Margot says, great work, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Margot.
Yeah, it's
And we
very
would
nice.
all agree. I think we can all agree. Lovely images. Oh, so soft. And like you said, the transparency, even of the various ways you put things together. It's really
Mhm.
lovely aesthetic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the workshop you're going to have at Paper Connection. It's a great place. And
Yeah.
yeah, a great place to be part of.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paper Connection is in Providence in the Art
Yes.
Annex in Pawtucket. Yeah.
And Nita is asking, where would we find the class info in Pawtucket? You would go to the Paper Connection.
Okay.
I don't think it's posted yet.
Not
No,
yet.
it's not. I'm just checking. That's why I asked.
Yeah,
It's not
because
posted.
we're trying to figure out the date in September. It's one of two dates, and as soon as we can post that, we will. Yeah, I think it's either September 16th or 23rd, but hopefully this week we're going to figure out that date. So
Terrific. Well, thank you.
They're starting to increase the number of classes that they're teaching.
yeah, yeah. And Lauren is an incredible resource. She
She
goes
is.
in
Yeah.
all the time. She's so knowledgeable. Yeah.
We took a NEBA field trip to visit with her, and I think we should make maybe once NEBA has some time in September, maybe we can try to plan a field trip back again and maybe do the annex this time instead of
Great.
yeah,
Yeah.
always fun.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, why don't we move on to Carol McNamee now? And Elisa, you can now sit back and enjoy. I'd like to introduce Carol McNamee. Following a successful first career as a professor of computer science in California, Carol retired in 2000 and pursued a new career as a marriage and family therapist with a specialization in the therapeutic use of the expressive arts. In 2005, she founded Willowbank Creative Center in Blacksburg, Virginia, where she focused on her own artistic endeavors and directed the Arts in Healthcare project in collaboration with the Family Therapy Center of Virginia Tech. In 2015, Carol retired again and moved to New England, where she renewed her focus on her own artistic efforts. And her work spans multiple media, including painting, printmaking, collage, and book arts. And she's going to tell us all about this stuff that she's so interested in.
So I'm going to try and share screen. My path obviously has been quite different from some. And so I came to book arts, and actually art, while it was a part of my childhood, was put on the back burner for other things for a long time. My forays into the world of book arts began about 25 years ago, and it's taken a number of different paths. Exploration. First, it was exploring book structures, bindings, materials, and then I got hung up on this: how do you display a book? It's hard, and I'll show you what I did. And then the logical movement was into artist books. But I also really like repurposing old books, using them for collage. And a little bit about me, you just heard probably enough. the love of books is in my DNA. My mother owned a used bookstore. My sister owns a used bookstore. I needed to take a different path. And when I started getting into books, I got Alyssa Golden's book of 100 and whatever it is, and I decided I was going to do a Julie and Julia thing, and I was just going to do every one of the books that she had in there. And I actually didn't accomplish that, but I did a lot of them. And then I attended many, many workshops, many at the North Bennett Street School, and a whole variety of other ones. I sort of was obsessive about learning as much as I could. And this is my studio, my mess, and my view. And the view is incredible. I live in Quechee, Vermont. And I'm still wearing warm clothing for those of you who are out there in your sleeveless shirts. So I started with this exploration of structures, bindings, and materials. And this is some of what was produced by, the myriad efforts. I decided that case bindings with blank books, while a real challenge, if I did 300 of them, I might actually have that down. But it wasn't what I was really interested in. And I also played around with miniature books. And down in the lower right-hand corner here is a Shrigley binding with postage stamps. And then I got enthused about Chinese thread books. This particular one has 15 pockets. And I had fun with that. They're all hand-painted papers. And then I got into boxes. The one on the left probably took at least 40 hours. I will never do it again. But I learned a lot doing all of this. And then I got to this, well, how do you display this stuff? Displaying books is hard. And so I decided I was going to work with, I ordered these boxes, panels with niches in them. And these are, the one on the left, those are all World War II ration books that my family had saved. And I used crown binding, and so they're all in there, and they're actually attached through holes in the back of the niche, so that they can't come out. And then the one on the right, it took me forever to figure out how to do that fold on the paper, and I enjoyed playing with that. And then the logical progression was to artist books. And these are two relatively recent ones. This one is based on Mary Oliver quote, "Tell me what do you plan to do with this one wild and precious life?" And that's what's in the front side in black and white, and then the back of the book, if you go at it, is all in color. And then I like playing with words, and so a bibliophobia is a fear of running out of reading material, which the entire family suffers. And so I started playing with words that come from the Urban Dictionary. They're a little offbeat. Snollygoster. Anyway, kerfuffle. I had fun with that. And then some of the collages using old deconstructed books. This one I called Novel Endings. This is 18 mixed media collages that are done with old books, and the circles are old book pages that were painted, and then I cut them out, and I had more fun arranging these figuring out which ones I wanted to put together. And then when I had all 18 of them, how was I going to arrange those? And that one was at Unbound at Artistry in
Who
Vermont.
was the model in your installation view?
That's one of my grandchildren. I forced him to go to the opening at Artistry. He tolerated it.
Excellent.
He was good natured.
Now, some of those little squares have writing on the little mat area that isolates them. What are you writing on there?
I didn't write anything on them. They are from the books. They were written on the pages in the books.
I see.
Pulled those from.
I see. Okay. Oh, neat.
Does the next image in your slideshow have like a little bit closer in on some of this?
No.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
It's a really nice pattern.
Yeah, that one actually it had a really nice place at in the show that it was in, and it actually sold. And I got an award for it. It was I was shocked. Anyway, it was very nice. And these are some other collages that I've done with deconstructed book parts. Many of these are much more recognizable than on the earlier one, because they weren't painted over in quite the same way.
I see.
My sister, the used book dealer, was a little aghast at the fact that I had deconstructed a Peterson's Guide to Birds, but it was old and it was okay. These
sometimes you have to do that. A girl got to do it.
You know?
Yeah, it's hard to pulling apart books, takes there's a tension there. These also started with book elements, and you can still see some of them. There's more painting in these than in the others, but they all started. And then
very nice. Yeah.
What's next? So I spent a lot of time working with archetypal mandala images when I was in my therapist mode. And I decided to go back to some of that. And I have a couple of projects that are going on with them. One of them is this scroll. And these are actually mandala images that were taken. Three of them were done prior to April 16th, 2007. These were done, the ones in the middle were done shortly after April 16th, 2007. And then the last three were done some 4, 7, and 10 months afterwards. Now you ask, what was April 16th, 2007? We were at Virginia Tech when the shootings took place, and I was a therapist in town. And you can see how the nature of these mandala patterns changed afterwards. And because my thing was sort of expressive arts therapy, I decided I would do some of my own, because I was spending a lot of time working with families and folks during that process. And so I turned it into a scroll, and when I get out of this, I will share the scroll with you. In addition to that, I also went through a period of time down below where I did 100 mandalas in 100 days. I had been teaching workshops with this stuff, and I had a couple of students who took on the challenge to do that. And I hadn't done it myself, and I was somewhat embarrassed that I hadn't done it. And so I did it myself. And I have taken those 100 mandalas, and I couldn't put them in the same kind of scroll because it would have been way too long. So I'm using what's called a dragon scale, which is historically a short period of time that they were in use, that transitioned the scroll, was a transition between a scroll and a codex. And I can show you. Well, I'll do that after I get out of the screen share. And then finally, I've been playing with echo printing, and this one on the right is echo printing in an album created with echo prints in an album created with crown binding. So I'm going to stop the share, and then I can show you. This is the current state of that scroll. I've got it in a box.
It needs to be in the middle of this.
There.
Video.
Nice.
And so you can now scroll it. Oh, I'm turning it the wrong way. Anyway, you can now move through it this way, and my
Your filter effect is wreaking havoc on your live share.
yeah,
Because,
I'm going to change that. So anyway, this is the current state. I am creating my own book cloth to cover this box, and I'm creating a cap for it. But that's the state of that one. And then
What's the medium and the paper that you're using for those mandalas themselves?
well, the original mandalas are just done on like Canson's. They're 12 by 18. These are actually digital reproductions because the originals, the theory around it is that when you're creating that mandala as an expressive, intuitive kind of process, you want the size of it to be roughly the size of a head.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so these are, I don't know, 6 by maybe 5 by 7 in this box. And so they're much smaller. I had to scan them, and that was quite a process.
Oh, yeah, 100 of those and
Yeah.
printing them out and working on the color.
Yes. It was just about I had just about lost my marbles with that. But and then here's the 100 of them.
Can you hold it up just a little higher? There you go.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Can we see it in a way that shows how they're attached to the base scroll? Like how the actual dragon scale is attached?
Let me see.
Oh, I guess you have to go all the way to the beginning.
Well, what about the end?
So.
Yeah.
They're tipped in here. And then the next one is a 1/4 of an inch.
So
This is actually,
wow.
This is a prototype.
Nice.
So I actually have to redo the whole thing in the kind of paper I want it to be on. But I wanted to do this to see if I could actually make this work.
Yeah.
And
works beautifully.
It really does, yeah.
it's, except that you really have to
Unwieldy.
get to a point where you can actually see and I'm sitting there going, you're not seeing any of the mandalas.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, they're on the inside.
Yeah, they're on the inside. So anyway, when it's splayed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
So that's where it's at. That's what I'm working on right now.
Man, that's really neat.
Lovely.
I had this same thought. Gwendolyn in the chat says, I've bought so many books with the intention of taking them apart and then not being able to bring myself to do it.
Mhm.
Maybe this will help. So see, you're providing therapy to us through your work.
Altered
Yeah.
books is something I've taught for a long time, and there are people who are never going to take a class like that. But I've noticed that a lot of my students have been librarians, and they understand the ideas of elevating something because you love it, or shredding something because you hate it, or outdated content, because there are a whole lot of things that ideas have changed over time. And so there's, so much fodder for things that are just purely outdated that you shouldn't feel so bad about destroying it.
Yeah, I had to think of it as giving new life to something that's been sent out to pasture.
Yeah.
Right, you're making it better. And like you said, new life, making it an art piece. You've done wonderfully. So you do quite a bit of painting as well, yes?
Yes. Yeah. That's how I got back into art.
Mhm.
And
And how do you end up in Vermont from Virginia, at
California.
California?
In
How
Atlanta. Yeah.
how does that happen?
The short version of that is that we're originally from New England.
Ah,
We ended up graduate schooling in California and spent 2 years in New York, and then went back to California for 30 years. The kids were grew up there. And yeah.
well, nice. Well, we're glad you're back. Holy cow. Thanks for being part of NEBA.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be back too. So thank you.
Good. Well, thanks for this. Arlene says, just as an aside, I've had librarians say it's okay to repurpose books. Go for it. So there we go. We have permission, Gwendolyn, to destroy books for a better purpose. Thanks, Carol. Thanks for showing this to us and introducing yourself and taking the time to put all this together. It was really a beautiful journey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions? Any others? Do anybody have questions for Carol? All right. Well, let's bring Allie up so we can see her face while I do a little introduction. Hi, Allie.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Allie has a little bit of a different story to tell because she builds amazing communities. Years ago, she learned about handmade books, and ever since she's been hooked. Having spent more than 10 years teaching in-person classes, she decided to reach a wider audience in 2019 and founded the online Handmade Book Club. Through the club, she's met thousands of other passionate bookmakers, mixed media artists, and crafters. It's the Handmade Book Club is a community of bookmakers from around the world. Each month, Allie teaches a new bookbinding project to the club members. And in addition to making books, the club members love learning about ways to fill their handmade journals. That's why they host guest artists and speakers every month as well. So really tell us your very interesting story here, Allie.
All right. Can I just say I don't have a slideshow. I just have my overhead camera and a pile of books on my desk. Is that okay?
That's absolutely.
Okay, good. All right, good. So, well, originally I'm from England. As you can tell, I kind of talk funny. I've been living in New England for over 25 years, and I came to making handmade books when my daughter was 2 years old, and she just graduated college yesterday. So that's why I was coming back.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. What a team effort. So that's why I was on the highway coming back from that. And I started out by making her a little 2x2 book, two by two accordion book, and filling it with all sorts of little, cute little memories for her. And from that point on, which is now 21 years ago, I was kind of hooked on making books. But I love books for their own sake. Like I do fill some of my books. I'm going to show you those. But the structure of the books themselves is what kind of floats my boat. But just backing up, because everyone has explained where they are. I'm right now, I was in Lowell for 7 years at Western Ave Studios in Lowell, and that's a big sort of 5-floor mill building. So I was there for 7 years, which is where I finished out my sort of in-person teaching. And then 2 years ago, my studio moved to Groton, Massachusetts, which is where I live. So this is 7 minutes from my house. And this is like an old sort of decommissioned school building that I have a couple rooms, 2 kind of classrooms upstairs. So it's awfully fun to be here. And you can see behind me just a fraction of some of the books I make, because I focus a lot on structures. So I really like, I'm just looking at some of my notes. I am self-taught. I have taken a number of classes at North Bennett Street School just for some technical knowledge, but I really like, I'm going to just grab this. I am self-taught from sort of vintage bookbinding books. So I love to, when I'm in the UK, when I'm in the States, I love to rummage around old used bookstores and also online and just find all these antique or vintage, whatever you want to call them, books about bookbinding, both Western and Eastern bookbinding methods. So I'm a little obsessed with bookbinding structures. So, and in particular, I really like limp bindings, like the soft covers. So I'm going to flip my camera around and hopefully you'll be able to see it. And what you'll notice is in some of my work that I really like to use modern materials. A lot of traditional limp bindings are vellum and parchment and different types of animal skins. I prefer to experiment with newer materials that we can get today. So that's kind of my spin on the traditional bookmaking methods, but with modern materials. So I hope that will make sense. Let me switch my camera around. I might just need to adjust it. Yeah, I'll need to adjust it a little bit. So excuse me for a tick.
Well done. Well done.
Oh, well, thanks. That is. Hold on, but I would like to make it a little bit higher. Hold on.
Hmm.
Nope, that's okay. You'll just see the very close up on my hands, very close up. So actually, I might just elevate my camera a little bit with that vintage book I just used. So here's an example of some of the more modern books that really inspire me. Some of you may know this book, but oh, hold on. Let's lock
Here we go.
There we go. You might know this Myrna book, the medieval bookbinding. This is something I really love. And also this lady from Sweden, Monica Langva, who does the Vatican bindings. These are the kind of books, you know, I read in bed at night. So fun stuff. So here's a few examples of, I have so many. So here are some of the limp bindings, for example, that kind of float my boat. Here is a long stitch link stitch, which many of you probably recognize, but this is a really, really old binding that you'll find in some of, many of the older libraries in the world. But my modern twist on it is that it is made with Craftex, which is this paper fabric. It has a little vintage button, because I do like me some vintage things. But instead of making it in parchment like you would traditionally see it, I like to make it in these bright colors, but with this traditional binding method. And the same here with this other limp binding that we've got here. This is a paper from Mexico. Let's just unwrap it with a couple vintage buttons. But these little pieces here on the spine, they're cork fabric, which is kind of a modern material. This is a handmade paper from Mexico. Then inside, I've got a little polka dot there. Inside the actual binding is a link stitch binding, but then it's got this sort of limp wrapper around it. So those are the kind of books that make me pretty excited. Here is some more limp bindings, which these are sewn boards binding, which again is an older structure, but they don't look old. These are my own paste papers on the outside. And then on the spine are layers again of this Craftex paper. And then underneath, this has got Craftex underneath. This has got my own paste papers. So these are sort of modern, bright colors, but the method of binding them is very, very traditional. So that's an example of some kind of Western ones. I also absolutely love stitching. Sorry, I know this camera's a bit close. It's like in your face. I'm not sure I can make it any higher. Sorry.
It's fine. It's
Is that-
fine. Yeah.
I don't want to. It's like
No, it's great.
it's like you're seeing my face close up, like the pores of my face.
We want to see the pores of your books.
Okay, good. Not my face. So here again, this is a limp binding. This is the kind of my light away. Let me just move this light away. This is the kind of binding that you would see inside a traditional hardcover book, but I've decided to make it visible on the outside with some handmade paper made in Vermont. And then this, this twill tape is a more modern spin on it. So hopefully you kind of get the idea that this is
Beautiful.
traditional bindings with modern materials. And this is kind of Celtic weave binding. Again, traditionally with a hard cover, but I really like to do them with soft covers and Vermont handmade papers.
Beautiful.
But they don't all have to be Western style, my friends. They can be, here are a couple of Eastern bindings. So this, Carol was talking about, interestingly, my next project is the dragon scale binding because it sort of bridges the gap between Eastern and Western. So this is actually an Eastern binding. It's called the butterfly binding, my spin on it. So this is an Eastern binding traditionally, but I've kind of adapted it for modern use. You can see that. This is a handmade Vermont paper. This is, I think it's the same paper as this. This is a Mexican paper.
What, the handmade Vermont paper? Where are you sourcing that from?
Well, that's an interesting story. So there's a Vermont paper maker called Richard Langdell. Here's some of it, you can see it. And he retired about 10 years ago, and he had about 15,000 sheets left of his own paper. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to buy that paper.
Oh,
Yeah, ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's so much paper. We had like a 10 by 10 U-Haul. And then, so I've used a lot of it and sold some of it, but then about a year ago, a friend of a friend said, someone's found some more of this paper in a barn in Vermont. So I just got another 10,000 sheets of this paper. So just reach out to me if you need some handmade paper, because I have a lot of this paper. So, and I love the fact that it was made in Vermont, because normally
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
paper's coming from overseas and I
right.
make paper, but so anyhow, so surprisingly, this also is an Eastern, this is a flutter book, which I know many of you are familiar with, but this is a traditionally Eastern book binding, but you wouldn't think that because it looks really modern because I've used my paste papers in it. So again, it's got a hard cover with, like I say, modern paste papers inside, and then an Italian book cloth on the spine. But a lot of these paste paper designs are sort of the older, the Herrnhuter paste papers from Germany. A lot of those are some of these are based on sort of old paste paper designs, but then putting them in, pairing them with like more modern paste paper designs. So that really kind of, I find that kind of exciting to be able to combine the two.
It's lovely.
Yeah, and then if you would like to see some more traditional, oh, here's another one of these sewn boards bindings. And again, this is a Mexican handmade paper, but again with, a Craftex spine, which is so different and textured, and then with a sort of nice bead, like a kind of modern looking bead. So again, a very traditional book structure. Anyhow, if you would like to see something a lot more traditional, oh, okay, one more thing, I'm sorry. Again, another limp binding. This looks a lot more traditional with the leather, but then I've combined it with a modern kind of beads right here. Literally, these are from like a craft store. I think they're plastic even. And then a stitching pattern of my own design.
That's a nice looking stitch.
Right. Oh, love me some stitching. So yeah, modern and old all kind of mixed together. So if you would like to see something a lot more traditional, this is a traditional Coptic binding. So when I do fill my books with things, as it were, with content, they are generally based around the seasons, or they're based around gardens that I have traveled to. So either my own garden, or I visit a lot of English gardens when I go visit my family. So a lot of my more traditional looking books like this is a, an East, some people would call it a Coptic binding with like an Ethiopian board attachment. On the inside, this is the summer of 2019. So this is what was in my yard in the summer of 2019. So, and I like to record. So these are eco prints. I know many of you are very familiar with. I do like the little Latin, quote, Latin names of the plants. So, and then the pages are, they're tea dyed and rust dyed. So this is the inside of, so each of the signature wrappers has got an eco print. Again, in an ideal world, I would fill up these pages with writing, but that's never, ever going to happen. So I have good intentions. I have good intentions, it never happens though. But it's just lovely to have a record. So this tree, for example, it died during the pandemic, this smoke bush or smoke tree that we had. So I have a record of that. So.
How wonderful.
And my delphiniums, they only last 2 years, so I can never get delphiniums to keep growing. So, but I did one year manage to get them to bloom really well. So we got a record of the delphiniums, and
Love that plant.
yeah, the coreopsis, yeah, and this is really easy to grow and print, by the way. The coreopsis. So, and then the fabric is, an eco-dyed fabric, which I made into a book cloth. So again, that is a little more traditional looking, and a little less sort of bright and garish like some of my others. And then just a couple more, I promise. I won't take up much more time. A couple more sort of more traditional looking ones. Every time I go to England, we go to lots of gardens, and so I will, you know how you make a big master collage sheet. I will make a big master collage sheet of vintage papers and magazine images, and then I will go in afterwards and pop in photographs from the trip and quotes and so forth. This one, it might be a little more. This one's a little.
Now some machine stitching.
Yeah, it's a vintage key.
Oh, they're so
This is my Kew Gardens trip. So these are all from Kew Gardens in, I don't know, 2018 maybe. So this is just a record. I'm a little obsessed with gardens. That actually is down.
It's very chaotic, but visually it works.
Yeah, this is.
They're beautiful. I love the stitching, the random stitching.
Me too.
Nice little pocket.
The little pockets are great. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, so
Very exciting little book.
So those are my sort of more traditional books. And then honestly, I have to tell you, my first love still is the accordion book. Like, I will always come back to a really simple accordion. This is, a layered accordion. Oh, I'm not sure you can even see that. This is a layered accordion from a few years ago. Yeah.
So it's a tunnel book. It becomes a tunnel book.
Kind of, yeah, or like a star book, however you want to.
That's a really flexible structure. I like that.
Yeah. So there's windows cut out, and then, there's items from my garden. So twigs and birch bark. And then in between these little green strips, I don't know if you can see them, those are image transfers from photographs that I had made that I kind of popped in the back. Oh, sorry, it's hard to see.
No, it's good. It's perfect.
That's a really nice one. I like that.
So I do put things inside books, I promise. But again, and here's another accordion, because while I do love the book structures, at the end of the day, an accordion, I don't know if you can see this very well, an accordion book, it's just so special. And again, this is another eco print book with this is a modern material, it's wood paper, which I really love. So I slid that into this accordion and I did some hand stitching in the accordion book. So
Beautiful
these,
little tags.
yeah, I know, right? Who doesn't love a tag hanging? A tag in a pocket.
Yep, who doesn't love a tag?
Yeah, there's
With
the
your
cover. And then the back, you can
strips of
see.
fabric. Oh,
Oh, love fabric. Oh. So yeah, there's the front. So yeah, that's those are, and also like Carol, I do love me some minis. So I love the mini scroll. I'm always making like mini scrolls to go in matchboxes. I just love things like that. And then mini Japanese stab bindings. Again, this is a traditional, you know, a stab binding is a traditional method to make a book, but there's nothing traditional about these bright colored little book, you know, boxes. So so yeah, I love a mini
those are
book too.
precious.
So that's, I think I got everything. Let me just check my notes. No, I think I said everything I needed to say. Yeah, let me switch my camera around and I'm happy to answer any questions. And but I have to tell you at the end of the day though, my first love, not only the books themselves and the book structures, but it's bringing that to other people. That's like, that lights me up every single day, is just seeing other people create books and that sort of wonder, that first book that they create, like, I made a book, like, yeah, you made a book. So that, yeah, that feels.
And that's what launched your handmade book club, right? And you have a website. And you also have that vintage paper
Page design.
Page designs, yeah. Yeah.
And tell us what that is.
That's just my original website. I started blogging in 2007.
Okay.
So I thought, oh, Vintage Page Designs is a really good name for a blog. It's really not very, not much about book. So yeah, so that just started a long time ago, and that's just like the original website that I have, and it's still where everything lives. But then the Handmade Book Club had to have its own little website because it's not little anymore. So yeah, I just
referencing them both on both sides so people can jump back and forth. So yeah, I think it's pretty clear. And you have you're a new NEBA member, so your member listing's going to get posted soon, and those links will be there so people can come check out all your cool stuff. I love the Instagram and Facebook and all the video footage, and you know how generous you are with your joy and your knowledge. And it kind of goes in line with why NEBA even exists in and of itself, is that we have joy in finding agency and community within this group of people that are really jacked and excited about books and all ways that they can exist. And so we're happy to have you as a member and look forward to doing more stuff together.
Thank you so much, Allie.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the group? No, wait, some stuff has come in from the chat. Carol says the eco printing in her last slide was done on Langdale's paper that she got from Allie several years ago.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Cool is that? Gwendolyn, you gotta Google eco printing. There's she'd like to know, I mean, there are different ways to do it. It's involved with heat and steaming and rolling and that kind of thing. You roll sticks and leaves and stuff right into paper, tie it up and steam it.
Yeah.
And fabric as well.
Yeah. And in fact, can I just say one thing, that Carol and I did eco printing together before the pandemic. And when Carol was living in Sudbury, Massachusetts, we were in a little group together, and we were in her garage, like with all these pots and everything going. So some of those papers could well be from that day that we spent together, Carol. So
that's lovely.
Also,
wow.
I wanted to mention that I sent my sister Sally to Allie's Handmade Book Club a number of years ago, and she loved it.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Well, I think it behooves all of us NEBA members to check out Ally's Handmade Book Club and see what's going on there. Don't you think? So thank you,
I already
everyone.
did. I'm already checking it out. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, particularly Ally and Carol and Lisa for sharing their work and their thoughts and their loves and their passions with us today. We will be taking a summer break now, NEBA. We're going down for a few months so that the powers that be can do a catch up. Powers that be means Christina, but we still need, you know, volunteers to take on some things like setting up some field trips in your area to keep the spirit going and things that, and please send Susan Marsh, who's our newsletter master, all your postings for your classes and things so we can keep that newsletter really Zoftic and full.
I want it to be irritatingly long. Like it was this past month. I mean, you kept scrolling. It was fantastic.
And that is the part of NEBA that gets the most outside interest, is the postings of our members, their workshops and their classes. And so please hand that information over. I know I was telling Christina today that I posted four things on my website for teaching with demos and workshops. And between that and posting it on Instagram, it's like, oh, I'm done now. But in fact, no, you're not. Get it over to NEBA. Just copy and paste it and send it in an email. Christina, if you send it to Christina, she'll forward it to Susan, but send it to Susan, ideally, so Christina can be out of that loop.
The email is newsletter@newenglandbookartist.org. It's wonderful.
There you go.
So exciting. Thank you for getting our hearts beating today, you guys.
Thank you so
And
much. Thank
A
you.
wonder watching you.
Very
and-
inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.